Live Fit Podcast, episode 53, with Traci Mann, who explains why diets don't work.
About dieting and obesity, because so much of the information about dieting and obesity that we get come from people whose goal isn't to tell us the truth, but whose goal is to sell us something. Finding that, wow, it's not what they say. It's not calories in, calories out. Much more complicated than that. What they call non-nutritive sweeteners are, NNSs, all the fake sugars that are put into soft drinks. Turns out those are as bad for you as consuming all this sugar. They're linked to diabetes, they're linked to heart disease, they're bad for you in all these ways. And one of the big things, that they're working on there right now is trying to find ways to get people to stop drinking those. People seem to think that exercise improves your health because it makes you thin, because it makes you lose weight. But that's actually not true. Exercise improves your health whether or not it leads you to lose weight.
You're listening to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson. Here, we'll talk about all things related to good health, fitness, food, fat loss, and the mind-body connection.
Yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I am your host, Glenn Johnson. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It is great to be here again speaking with you. This is episode 53, and on today's episode, I speak with Traci Mann. She wrote a book called Secrets from the Eating Lab. In this book, she gives scientific evidence that proves that diets do not work. I brought Traci on because this is what I have been saying for years, forever actually, and she's done the research and written a book about it to explain exactly why. And on this episode of the Live Fit Podcast, she's going to tell you. Now, Dr. Traci Mann is a tenured professor at the University of Minnesota, and she is uniquely qualified to provide the real truth about dieting, eating, obesity, and self-control. Because she doesn't run a diet clinic or test diets, and she has never taken a penny from a commercial diet company, sat on any of their boards, or endorsed any of their products. Because of this, her livelihood, research funding, and reputation are not dependent on her reporting that diets do work or that obesity is unhealthy. This sets her apart from nearly all diet and obesity researchers and allows her to speak the truth about these topics. Now, this is a longer interview than I normally publish. It's about an hour long, but I felt her information was worthwhile and worth your time. So please, without further ado, let's listen to Traci Mann tell us why diets just do not work, and they're just not worth your time or your effort or your pain and suffering. Hi, Traci. How are you doing? Welcome to the Live Fit Podcast.
Thank you. I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
You know, Traci, the reason I brought you on here is because my wife told me about you, and she heard of your very fascinating and interesting philosophy about dieting. What is that in a nutshell?
Well, thank you to your wife, first of all. Well, I can say it in a sentence. Diets don't work. Don't do it. I guess that was two sentences.
Okay.
It depends. Maybe there's a semicolon.
Yeah, we'll just structure it that way, just to call it one sentence.
Let's call it that.
And I did know that, and that's why I brought you on here, because this is something that I've been promoting with my Live Fit programs for a long time. Now, I don't know if you're aware of it, but I have a couple of programs for the intent of helping people control their eating. And on the surface, they look like diets, but in reality, they're a progression from one to another to help a person kind of normalize and give them a healthy eating pattern. And then they usually go on to coaching with me. And then I sort of move them away from such a structured program to one of ownness, where they completely own what they want. They can eat what they want, but of course in a smart and sensible manner. So can you tell us sort of about what your book promotes and how they go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I try to just come right flat out and give the evidence that diets don't work.
Right.
Because I find that people need to hear that. They don't necessarily believe that right off the bat. So I explained the evidence, which could not be more clear. I mean, it is absolutely clear. We looked at every single diet study that followed people for 2 years or longer.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see across the board is that within about 3 years, people on average have gained it all back.
No kidding.
Yeah. So in the short run, people can lose weight and they do it all the time. But in the long run, it's only a really small minority of people who manage to keep it off.
Do you have any kind of numbers of how many people keep it off for 3 years or more?
Yeah. I mean, this is a number that I'm not absolutely satisfied with scientifically, but I see it around and I think it's probably in the ballpark, which is about 5% of dieters keep it off in the long term.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really a small minority.
And the long term is only 3 years, right?
Yeah. Well, the studies range from 2 years to 10 years in their follow-ups, but with an average of about 3 years. And then after 3 years, the average amount of weight people have kept off is about 2 pounds. Which is nothing. That's scientifically, that's the same as zero.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because I've seen a lot of people lose weight and get on a really healthy exercising program, whether it's with me or not with me, and they maybe do something really extreme but whatever, they really change their life around and they lose all this weight. And it just breaks my heart when I see them gain it back again.
Yes. And it breaks their heart too.
It does. It's very demotivating. Yep. And that's one reason why I tell people not to go on diets. And I know there's a lot of people that do it more out of hobby and habit because that's just the way they've been raised and how they think it should go. But it's really sad to see how many people return back to their old ways. And what very few realize going into it is that maintenance is even harder than weight loss. And it's probably a good thing. And I don't really say that a lot because at that time they're generally struggling to lose weight and they think, oh, this is so hard. And if it's only harder after this, then they're just going to give up before they start.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true. But the fact is, the maintenance part is the harder part. Because the unfortunate truth is that dieting, restricting, depriving yourself, that actually makes it harder to keep weight off because it leads to all these different biological changes in your body because your body does not know that you want to keep weight off. Your body thinks you are in danger of starving to death.
Right.
And so it sort of switches into its sort of danger mode, its sort of starvation mode. And does all these things that are great for keeping you alive longer with less food, but that don't help you continue to lose weight. So, for example, the example that everyone, I think, inherently understands is that your metabolism changes after you've been dieting so that your body can run itself on fewer calories, and that leaves more left over to store as fat. So what that means horribly, if you're trying to diet, it means that you can continue consuming the same amount of calories you've been consuming to lose weight, but suddenly you're not going to lose weight. It just stops working, or you'll even start gaining weight. And the particularly unsettling or infuriating aspect of that, I guess, is that people will then accuse these dieters of slacking off on their diet, of having no self-control, when in fact, they're eating so little, and they're eating just as little as they were when they lost weight. You know, they're not out of control. They're not doing anything wrong or differently necessarily. But the diet stops working because your body changes.
Right.
It's cruel.
Is there a time frame that normally happens? Have you seen scientific evidence on such?
I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any good news about that. I know that for the neurological changes, which I haven't even mentioned yet, but the neurological changes that dieting causes, those can happen after just, half a day of fasting.
No kidding.
Or after losing, the study that I saw that looked at that found that if you'd either lost 2 pounds in the past 2 weeks, or if you'd fasted from wake up for just 5 hours, you would have these brain changes where you're more preoccupied with food, you notice food more, you have harder time pulling your attention off of food. All those things clearly make it harder to diet. If you're thinking about nothing but food, clearly it's going to be harder to resist it and to avoid it.
Well, that leads me to something I wanted to ask you about. And that sounds like what most people tell me is that they lack willpower. And what you're saying is if you're dieting, I heard an example a long time ago about food restriction. And this person who was talking said, okay, right now, everybody hold your breath.
Right.
So we did. And he started talking about things, and he's really prolonging what he's getting at, because he wanted us to get towards the 1 minute mark where you're really starting to miss breathing. And he said, how long can you go without breathing? Yeah, at first, no big deal. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, even 20, not a big deal. But as you get closer to a minute, then you start becoming very, very, very preoccupied on breathing. And no matter what the person is saying that you're listening to, you're going to hear less and less and less of what they're saying, because all you want to do is breathe. And he brought this up because that's a very good analogy for what dieting is like.
That really is. I've actually heard the phrase, I think I've used it actually in academic papers, dieting is like holding your breath.
Ah, good.
It's really true. At some point, you do in fact have to breathe.
True.
There's no getting around it. Well, okay, so let's talk about willpower. I think that the general belief out there is that if you can't lose weight, or if you regain weight you lost, it's because you have no willpower.
Right.
And I believe that's absolutely false.
I do too. I've heard that so many times. And I've also heard that willpower is like a muscle and you can strengthen it with exercise.
Nope.
But the caveat to that is that it will still fatigue if overused.
Yeah. So I have also heard some scientists say what you just said, that you can strengthen willpower like a muscle. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that you can strengthen willpower like a muscle. You can get around having to use willpower, and those are the kinds of strategies I'll suggest later. But willpower itself, whatever level of willpower you have, that's your level of willpower.
Right.
So you're not going to be able to strengthen it. But it doesn't matter. And here's why it doesn't matter. Well, first of all, you just need to picture the situation when you try to resist eating something. So suppose, you're in a meeting and some lovely coworker of yours comes in with a box of donuts. Lovely of them, great. But you're trying not to eat a donut. So you have to resist it, and you have to use your willpower to resist it. Mm-hmm. So first of all, that's not one act of willpower. That's a whole ton of acts of willpower, right? You have to resist it when they bring it in and you notice it.
Yep.
That's one act of willpower. And you have to resist it every single time that you notice it or think about it, right? You have many, many, many opportunities to have it. Now, if you've been dieting already, restricting what you eat, those brain changes that I talked about will have happened. So you're going to be all the more likely to notice it. You're going to be all the more likely to keep thinking about it, to lock onto it. You're going to actually have a harder time paying attention to your meeting because your mind is going to keep focusing on that donut. So if you've been resisting, you have even more acts of self-control or resistance that you have to do, and they're going to be harder. Nevertheless, let's say you're great. Let's say you have amazing willpower. Let's say you're one of those people who are on the higher end of the willpower scale. You're better at it. Mm-hmm. So let's say you resist it 20 times. Maybe every other minute you look up and notice it and want one and resist taking one. That's amazing. You've shown absolutely stunning, impressive willpower. However, on the 20th time, I don't know what number I just used, but the next time, let's say the 20th time, you have a moment of weakness. Maybe you're distracted and you grab a donut and you eat it. Okay, that momentary just spot of weakness right there has cost you all that impressive self-control you've shown so far. It basically erases all the impressive self-control you've shown. So, you're no different than someone who ate it on their third time thinking about it. So basically, lapses of self-control when it comes to eating, and this isn't necessarily true with other things, but when it comes to eating, lapses in self-control completely erase any successful self-control you've shown. And because of that, differences between people get sort of smoothed out, evened out, and everyone kind of ends up the same. Unless your willpower is 100% perfect, it's not going to be enough.
Right.
Okay, so because of that, willpower does not help anyone for the most part. It would have to be nearly perfect, and it isn't. Because what research shows is that willpower is incredibly fragile. It's very easy to disrupt it. So there's very few people for whom willpower is going to save the day. And it just, in the end, it doesn't explain differences between people, and it really doesn't help anybody. So the crucial thing is to make sure that you don't need willpower, to make sure you're not in situations like the one I described, where you are face to face with something that you are trying not to have.
Okay, so let's say you work in an office and people tend to bring in donuts because they think they're being nice and generous and offering a little fun. And maybe it's a every Friday or every Monday habit or whatever it might be. And let's say your desk happens to be fairly close to the break room or the table where these donuts are sitting. What can you do to resist eating these donuts?
Yeah, well, this is a horrible situation.
It is, but it's a real one. I've heard it so many times.
Yeah, no, me too. And I mean, so this situation is going to require a lot of strategies. Most of my strategies have to do with not being in that situation.
Right.
And I guess that actually would come into play here too, particularly if this is a predictable thing. If you know that's going to happen every week, or you know what I mean? If this is like every Friday someone brings in donuts. And if that's the case, you can plan ahead on how to deal with that. You can plan ahead and have your own less problematic treat with you to eat instead. What else could you do in that situation? I guess this is a situation where you can use a certain sort of cognitive trick where you form what's called an implementation intention, a most annoying jargony word.
Oh, it sure is.
Isn't it? I know.
Implementation what?
Intention. If I had invented this, I would have called it something better. But nevertheless, forgetting what it's called, all it is a plan that you make ahead. You think ahead of a situation you might be in that will be a problem. And
gotcha.
Come up with a plan. And it's an if-then plan. So in this case, it could be, if I am at my desk and someone brings in donuts, then I will. And then you answer that. So in my case, here's how I've answered that. If I'm at work and someone brings in a box of donuts, then I will grab a cup of coffee and walk into a different room. Coffee will keep my hands occupied. For some people, this kind of thing will be a helpful solution. For others, maybe then I will, eat my apple that I brought that day. Whatever it is. You make this if-then plan. You make it ahead of time. You repeat it to yourself a few times. You got it down. And then when that situation happens, you actually will do this automatically. It will be as if it's a long-held habit that you do without thinking. And that's really what this sort of strategy is. It's basically forming a habit instantly. Habits are hard to form. They take repetition over and over and over for a long time. But this is a way to form one instantly, and it works. So this sounds ridiculous. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
When I first started hearing about this in research and such, I said, that's the stupidest thing. There's no way that works. That's ridiculous. But this has been extremely closely and carefully and rigorously studied. And the evidence is extremely, extremely powerful. It really does work. So if you actually do this and think ahead, it actually helps. And so ever since reading that it works so well and really examining the research, I've tried this myself, and it does work. Now, the downside, of course, is that you can't have one in mind for every situation you might run into.
Exactly.
But if there's a particularly problematic situation that you do encounter fairly regularly, this actually can really help you for that, because you're prepared for it, you know what to do, and then your body, your mind is already primed to do it. The problem in a lot of these cases is that it happens without you having any thought ahead of time of how you might handle it, without even having any thought ahead of time that this could be a problem. And so you're caught off guard. And so
Right.
I think the thing with this little strategy is it keeps you from being caught off guard.
It reminds me of a quote I often tell my clients, and I believe it's from Ben Franklin. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail.
Wow.
It's not quoted word for word, but it's very similar to that, using their type of English at the time. But basically, yeah, if you don't think ahead, if you don't plan ahead and put the the necessary articles in place, whether it's just your plan of action or as simple as making sure you have your gym clothes with you in your car, so when you go to the gym, you can actually work out and not use that as an excuse. But basically, if you don't do that, you're more than likely going to fail, and you can't leave success to happenstance. You have to plan success. And I find most people really live their lives kind of like a pinball and just bounce around and go, okay, well, I'll just eat whatever comes around. I'll do whatever. If I happen to have time for exercise and I feel like it, then I'll exercise. But if not, oh well.
That's a really good way to put it. It's a pinball idea. Yeah. Now, with that said, and with this strategy out there, I should say that it's not my favorite strategy, even though it does work, because I much prefer strategies that keep you from ever being put in a face-to-face situation with something you're trying to resist.
Right.
And that's because that's so hard. Resisting something you come face-to-face with is so hard. So all the other most of the other strategies I talk about are ways to keep that face-to-face thing from happening. And if you do that most of the time, then maybe the rare occasions when you do come face-to-face, maybe those are the ones where you do get to have the thing that you want. So I make a habit of not coming across donuts in my daily life. Then way if someone brings one into work, it's okay for me to have one. That's a treat. That's a treat that I can have.
True.
But let's talk about some strategies that keep you from coming face-to-face with these things.
Yeah, good idea.
So, fully the simplest thing of all is, rejiggering your schedule, rearranging your daily routine so that you run into less of these things. So for me, that would be changing the way I drive to work. Because if I choose one route, I go right past my favorite bakery and I cannot resist stopping and going in and grabbing something. But if I drive a different way, no problem. So I turn it into my habit to only drive this other way, this way that doesn't put me face to face with a bakery.
Right.
Okay, so changing your habit. Another version of that would be changing your schedule. So I think this could help a lot of people. I've rearranged my schedule so that my lunch break is not long enough for me to go off campus to a restaurant. When people go to restaurants, they tend to eat much less healthily than when they eat the food they prepare themselves.
Oh, gotcha.
So I don't have time to go off campus to eat. So I'm stuck with the healthy thing that I prepared for myself that morning when A, I wasn't hungry because I just wasn't hungry yet in the morning.
Yeah.
And B, my intentions were very strong to eat something healthy. So you prepare it in the morning and then you're locked in. If you don't have time to leave and get something else, you're locked into that thing you prepared that morning.
And you probably had a level head and were smart about what you prepared for yourself too, rather than letting low blood sugar or impulse dictate.
Exactly, because now when you're not hungry, it's very easy to prepare something healthy for later. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to make good intentions and good plans that you don't have to enact right this second.
Right.
So it's really easy to prepare a healthy lunch for later right now when you don't care either way because, you're not that hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really good to prepare ahead so that you're locked in. And getting locked in is the key. Getting locked into exercise, also extremely useful.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people, work out with a partner because even when they don't feel like going that day, they kind of have no choice because their partner is counting on them. That kind of thing. Now,
we've been talking about dieting or eating rather, but you brought up exercise. I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
In the book, at least, I apply most of the same eating strategies to exercise. So an implementation intention for exercise is something you could do. Rearranging your routine so that you don't encounter temptation to skip your exercise. Mm-hmm. So with food, the temptation is to eat something you shouldn't. With exercise, the temptation is to blow it off.
Right.
Right. So rearranging things so that you're less likely to blow it off. So for lots of people, that means exercising in the beginning of the day because by the end of the day, things have come up. Right. And there's just so many excuses toward the end of the day to skip it. Plus, you're tired. Everything is harder later in the day. So for a lot of people, the temptation is easier to deal with when you put it at the beginning of the day. Getting locked in, like I just said, absolutely hugely useful. So I rowed when I lived in Cambridge for a year in the UK, and I joined a rowing team. I had never rowed before, and I'm horrible at it, but joined a team anyway. And you sign up on a schedule. You sign up on a calendar for all these mornings that you're going to show up and row.
Right.
And you sign up, since it's so ahead of time, you have all these good intentions. You're feeling strong. You're feeling committed. When the alarm clock goes off in the morning, you're supposed to get out of your warm bed, bike in the rain to the river where you're going to now row in the rain.
Yeah.
You're locked in. You're stuck. There's no way out because the other people on the boat can't row if you don't show up, and they will kill you.
Right.
If you don't show up and they schlepped there. So locked in. So any ways you can find to get locked in are really awesome. That's really helpful.
Let's take a quick break.
The Live Fit Lean 28-Day Weight Loss Solution. Get a full 28-day meal plan, shopping list, recipes, snack menu, and exercise program you can do at home. Don't delay. Check out livefitlean.com today.
Now, there's talk about how long it takes to form a habit, and I've heard various numbers, whether it's 21 days or 6 months. Do you have a similar number, or does it just depend?
So I have searched through the literature on this because people are always asking about it.
Yeah.
I've only found one study that even tried to answer that question.
Really?
It wasn't that, I don't want to diss a study. It wasn't that solidly done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it came up with a very large number. So I don't know. The thing about habits is once they're formed, that's great. But how do you form it? Not sure. And how do you get rid of a bad habit? Same problem. Since habits, once they're formed, are so powerful, getting rid of a bad habit is also very difficult. So because of that, although I tell people to try to form habits, because of that, I think it's better to focus on this other thing I talked about, the implementation intention, the very specific sort of preparation for a difficult moment, if that makes sense. So instead of having this big, broad, I will eat healthily habit, which is too broad, the eating healthy habit that's really, 100 habits, all of which need to be formed. So that, I feel like that's not the most effective approach. I mean, I talk about it in the book. I give some strategies, but I don't know. I think I would, if I were to push certain strategies, I would push other ones, such as, especially the ones that help you, instead of resisting bad things, have you sort of increase your likelihood of eating good things. Basically, strategies to help you eat more healthy stuff without worrying so much about what you shouldn't eat. So a couple things. So one would be to remove obstacles between you and healthy foods. I'll tell you 2 ways to do that. One of them, my favorite strategy, most useful strategy of all, is what I call Veggies first, or get alone with a vegetable. And this is just, I find it the absolutely most effective strategy that I've used or that other people have told me that they found most effective. And this is just before you put any other food on your plate or on your table, get and eat your vegetable. So maybe that's make a salad and sit down and eat it and then get on with the meal. Or maybe it's cook up some broccoli and eat it. Whatever it is, have your vegetable without any other food whatsoever in your sight. Mm-hmm. And the reason for this is because for most people, the vegetable kind of comes in last after other foods. If it's next to something let's say it's next to the pasta, you're going to eat the pasta.
Yeah.
So vegetables tend to lose. But the surefire way to get yourself to eat a vegetable, and this works with children too, you will eat that vegetable if A, you are hungry, and B, it's the only thing around.
Right.
So, and this works beautifully. I'm not a huge vegetable lover, but I eat my vegetable first at dinner every night, and flat out works. I get that vegetable eaten, I enjoy it even, and it fills up some space that I would be filling with something bad. So a couple things. So we've tested this, first of all, with kids in school cafeterias, just giving them a cup of baby carrots before they go into the cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 times as many kids would eat vegetables in that situation. So
You
that's
mean the vegetables of the baby carrots, or do they get more when they get to the counter?
so it counts everything. So counting the baby carrots and what they get when they go through the cafeteria. The way we tested that is there's also baby carrots in the cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
That's just sort of necessary, just scientifically, to set it up right, because you need to compare it to something. So if you add up the total amount of vegetables they eat when given some first,
Gotcha.
it's 5 times as many.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You know, I love your Veggies First motto. I've been doing that with my kids. Will fix them a plate, or they'll have a plate of food, and I tell them to eat their veggies first, and then they can have the other stuff. I haven't actually phrased it veggies first. I haven't used that little motto, but I will now. And I think what would be even better is to have nothing else on the plate except the veggies, and then they can have other stuff. I really like that. I'm gonna borrow that for you from you. Do you have any other strategies?
Please do. Well, let me say one more thing about Veggies First, which is that we also tested this with college students, eating in a regular way as opposed to children. And what we found with them is not only did they eat more vegetables by using this strategy, but without even realizing it, they ate fewer calories. Because the vegetables they do fill you up. Lots of vegetables are pretty filling. And if you eat a bunch of them, it does end up replacing other things. So without actively restricting certain foods, you do end up eating less if you can get more vegetables into you. And the most important thing is that vegetables are the most healthy thing that you can eat, and you need to eat them. We all need to eat them. So there's that. Okay, so that's one vegetable strategy. Another vegetable strategy, what was the other one I was going to mention? Removing obstacles between yourself and vegetables. So here's the thing. Vegetables are high maintenance. They're a huge pain. You can't just walk into your kitchen and grab a vegetable and start eating it. That's not how most vegetables work. So to remove that obstacle, and so you end up grabbing a cracker or something that you can eat.
Oh, yeah.
You grab a potato chip. You grab something that you can just grab and eat. Vegetables don't work that way. So you need to make them that way. And what seems to be effective is when you get home from the store with your vegetables, which of course you bought with all these great intentions, prepare them right away. Clean them, chop them, whatever it is, get them in eating form. And then when you go into the kitchen hunting around for something to grab, you can grab one.
Yep.
And I have a link to it in the book. There's this amazing, inspiring video online of this woman coming home from the CSA with all her vegetables and preparing them all at once and making them look so amazing. And then they're just there for grabbing. Yeah, it's the woman's name is Tamar Adler. She's a writer for the New York Times now. But anyway, I would Google her video about getting your vegetables in order.
I will put that in the show notes. I'll find that and include that a link on the show notes at livefitpodcast.com.
So removing obstacles between you and the things you want to be eating. And the flip side of that is putting in obstacles between you and the stuff you want to avoid. Obstacles work extremely well with us human people because we tend to be lazy. And because we're lazy, even a small obstacle will slow us down. The example of this that I like to give is, your bowl of M&Ms. If it's right there on the table next to you, you'll eat a lot. If it's 5 feet across the room, you'll eat half as many. Research shows this because that's an obstacle. You have to stop what you're doing. You have to get up. You have to walk over. But an obstacle doesn't even have to be as big as that. And so that same research showed that if that same bowl of M&Ms is on the table where you're sitting, but you have to actually extend your arm 2 feet.
Holy cow.
You'll eat as few as if it's 5 feet across the room.
Really?
Yeah. So
humans are really lazy.
We are really lazy. And I have this ridiculous example in the book of if your toilet paper roll is squashed just a little bit so that it doesn't turn as smoothly on the thing, people will use way less toilet paper. So that is lazy. That is a small obstacle. Wow,
we're lazy.
Yeah, it's super easy to slow us down. So having, this obstacle, having it be just a little further away will help. Now, these obstacles don't stop you entirely. They just slow you down. They just lead you to eat a little less. But I think that's perfect, right? Because I still want people to get to eat the things they like and enjoy their life. And that's absolutely fine as long as you don't eat too much of them. So putting in some obstacles so that you just eat a little less of things should be all you need to do. That should just be plenty good.
You know, it's funny. Occasionally, I'll go grocery shopping with my wife, and she'll say, "You want some ice cream?" And nah, because I don't want it right then. So my rationale is, well, if I do want it bad enough, I'll go to the store some other time. And I live about a mile from a store, and out of probably 20 impulses for ice cream when we didn't have it, I went to the store once to get it because I just really, really had to have it. But there's 19 times that I didn't eat ice cream.
Yeah, beautiful.
Because I didn't have it.
Yeah, you put in an obstacle.
Yep, on purpose.
You know what would have been a great obstacle?
What?
Which didn't end up happening? That law they tried to pass in New York City where you could only sell soda in, I think, cups 16 ounces or smaller, something like that. And the thinking was, people would have less. Mm-hmm. And everybody made fun of it. It didn't end up happening. Something changed politically. Mm-hmm. But everyone made fun of this. I saw comedians making fun of this. Everyone's like, this won't keep people from drinking as much soda because they could just go up and buy a second one.
Sure they could. But it's an obstacle.
But it's an obstacle, and it would have slowed so many people down. It would have stopped so many people. I think that was just like a no-brainer as something that would have been helpful. Admittedly, it's one thing. It's soda. It's a drop in the bucket. But let's start putting drops in that bucket.
I think soda is really probably the single worst thing in Americans' diet. I teach a nutrition class, and I would say that a good quarter of my students every single term at the beginning stop drinking soda. Wow. And by the end of the class, they tell me that they've lost 5, 10, 15 pounds. And that's the only thing they changed was they eliminated soda. Yeah, I've heard people say that too. I have never liked soda. I wish I drank it and could eliminate it.
But I alas, I can't because I just never liked it. I always found soda very confusing. It's so strange. Why is it brown? Like, it's just what is it? I always found soda this very bizarre thing. But whatever.
What about the caffeine-free diet cola? No, what's the point of that?
Let's talk diet cola or diet soda. Yeah, I know what is even in that. I was just at this conference and at the NIH, the National Institute of Health, where one big topic there was how dangerous what they call non-nutritive sweeteners are, NNSs, all the fake sugars that are put into soft drinks. Turns out those are as bad for you as consuming all this sugar. Yep. They're linked to diabetes, they're linked to heart disease, they're bad for you in all these ways. And one of the big things, that they're working on there right now is trying to find ways to get people to stop drinking drinking the diet soft drink. So don't substitute your soft drink with a diet soft drink. That's not going to do you any, yes, there's fewer calories, but your health matters more than your calories. And that is not going to do anything better for your health.
Exactly. I'm curious, Traci, how did you come across or come to this way of thinking? Have you always thought like this? Is it something that kind of came upon you by happenstance? Were you a dieter? Were you just interested in this because of people you know and you started researching dieting? How did you come to write the book, Secrets from the Eating Lab?
Well, I guess sort of since you're asking me sort of how I came to become interested in this topic, there's one thing when I was younger, I watched my parents at various times in their lives go on diet after diet after diet. And I would see them go on a diet and be miserable and lose weight and then remain perfectly committed to their diet and still the weight would come back. And I found this so mystifying. Why is it coming back? They're still dieting and they would be so miserable the whole time. And I just thought it was the strangest thing why anyone would do this. And then at one point in high school, some girlfriends and I decided to diet just because that's what girls do.
Right.
Which is crazy, but that is what, none of us were overweight at all. And we went on this diet for 2 weeks. And I found it the most miserable thing I'd ever experienced. Mm-hmm. even foods that I didn't much care for before the diet. Since they weren't allowed, I was completely craving them. Since then, I've actually done research. Yeah, I've actually done research since then, which actually shows that very thing, that when you tell people they can't have something, they start to want it more, they start to think about it more, they start to crave it more.
Yep.
When we did this study, we didn't even tell people that they couldn't have something they liked. We had them pick a food without telling them we were going to forbid them from having it. We had them pick a food that they felt neutral about. And then we forbid them from having that food for 3 weeks. And it just made them completely crazy for it. So,
wow.
So all these things I noticed, when I was younger. And then in grad school, I started, for some reason, I had to read some articles about obesity and was absolutely shocked to find that nothing was as I had been told. And in particular, the one thing that just blew me away was all these studies showing that obese people didn't eat more calories per day than non-obese people. I said, what? How is this possible? What's happening? Nothing makes sense. And, it was around then that I started studying dieting and eating and weight control. And I think since I came to it sort of skeptical, I questioned everything. And instead of assuming that everything I'd heard was true, I started questioning everything.
Good.
And finding that, wow, it's not what they say. It's not calories in, calories out. Much more complicated than that. I don't know. And then maybe 12 years ago, I decided I wanted to write a book about why diets don't work, focusing on all these biological things that happen when you start to deprive yourself, plus all these psychological things that happen when you deprive yourself. And I tried to get a book deal, and no publisher would give me a book deal because they said it was just bad news. And then, yeah, I know. And that no one would want to hear bad news. And I thought, well, I think people would find it good news to learn that if they're struggling to keep weight off, it's not because they're weak. It's not because they're a weak loser the way our media portrays them, but rather it's because they are a human being who's evolved to survive through famines.
It sounds like good news to me.
I know. I think so too. I find it very liberating news, very comforting news. So I thought people would want to hear that. And also I thought, regardless of whether the news is good or bad, I feel like people do care about the truth and want to know what's true. And it's so hard to find true information, particularly about dieting and obesity, because so much of the information about dieting and obesity that we get come from people whose goal isn't to tell us the truth, but whose goal is to sell us something.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to get the truth about dieting and weight loss from commercial diet companies, and you're not going to get the truth about dieting and weight loss from obesity researchers whose livelihood, whose lab requires them to run a clinic where they try to get obese people to lose weight. You're not going to get the truth from them. Their vested interest is to convince you that they can, in fact, lose weight and keep it off. So it's very hard to find accurate, true information about dieting.
Yeah, and that's been my struggle too with my website and podcast and all the articles I write, is trying to convince people that I'm out for their best interest. Yes,
exactly.
I'd like to, make a living at it too, but I would love it if there were, and don't take this the wrong way, but I would love it if there were no more obese people, in that they would be much healthier. And of course, there's always going to be those outliers, but my entire goal in life, my existence, is pointed at preventing lifestyle diseases. And because of the way people eat and are less active than ever before, they are causing all these lifestyle diseases. And something else you said, that calories in, calories out doesn't work. Back on episode 32, I interviewed Jonathan Baylor. He wrote a book called The Calorie Myth.
Right. Sure.
You've heard of that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he says, is that calories in, calories out is a myth. It makes sense. If you explain it, a lot of things make sense, but it doesn't make it true. And other things don't make sense, like gravity, but it doesn't mean it's not true.
Right. And also there's this weird thing in our culture these days where people seem to believe that they can pick and choose whether or not to believe science.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so science is, I don't know, it's gotten this weird bad rap in like the last decade or so, where somehow people don't realize that, if careful research has shown it, you don't get to say, I choose not to believe that. That's not how it works. Like, science is true whether you like it or not.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's happy or sad news for you personally.
Well, it's like gravity. You can choose to not believe in gravity, but it's still pulling you down towards the core of the Earth.
Right. Exactly. One other thing, since you're saying that your goal is to prevent lifestyle diseases, there's one other misconception out there that I think it's helpful to dispel, which is that, about exercise, really, which is people seem to think that exercise improves your health because it makes you thin, because it makes you lose weight. But that's actually not true. Exercise improves your health whether or not it leads you to lose weight.
Yep.
Exercise will improve your health because it's exercise, not because it makes you thin. Right? What's healthy is raising your heart rate a certain amount.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So people, I think, they exercise partly because they want to be healthy, and they don't lose weight, and that demotivates them because they think, A, they're not getting the benefit, B, of course, they want to lose weight. That's how people feel. And C, they think they must not be doing it right. Because if they're not losing a lot of weight, they think, oh, something's going wrong. But the fact is, just by doing the exercise, you're helping yourself.
Well, a lot of times people will ask me about that. And basically the answer I give them is, yes, you can be fit and fat.
Absolutely.
Excuse the bluntness of it, but you can be overweight and still be very fit. I've known lots of people that were in equal fitness to me, and they were probably 40 to 50 pounds overweight for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just absolutely clearly shown scientifically. And the opposite, I guess you call it the opposite, is also true, which is you could be very slim and lovely.
Oh, yeah.
To look at, according to our culture, and be extremely unhealthy because you're not fit, because you're not active.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I've met plenty of those myself.
So the bottom line is, looking at a person does not tell you anything about their health or fitness level.
I teach a weight training class, and at the beginning of the class, we're talking about what fitness is, what the definition of fitness is. And so I stand up there and I ask the class, am I fit? And they all say yes. Of course, I'm in the position of being their instructor, so I should be. They're assuming I am, and I'm not overweight. So they're, once again, assuming that I'm fit. And then I ask them, okay, why do you say that? And most of them say something based on appearance. Well, because you look fit, because you're not fat. I'm like, okay. So then I break it down for them and tell them about the 6 components of fitness and what it actually means. And you see a marathon runner, you go, is he fit? Well, he's fit for running.
Right.
That's all you know. He might be fit for other things, but if you see him running, all you know is that he's fit for running. But still, once again, that's based on appearance.
Right. Wow, your class sounds fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I love it. I love teaching this stuff, and I really love seeing the eyes open up when they realize something. And that's, once again, leads me back to why I wanted to talk to you today, because you're saying what I've been saying and what some other people have been saying, but the majority of the population just doesn't want to believe it. Diets do not work. So where can people find Secrets from the Eating Lab?
Amazon.com and any other book site, and in stores too, but
So it's paper, electronic. You can get it in hard copy and electronically as well?
Yep, and I believe the audiobook comes out late August. So
wonderful.
To listen to your book, that's an option too. But yeah, I usually just say go to Amazon because, we're people.
Yeah.
Let's take away the obstacles. Let's just do a few mouse clicks and there it will be.
So Traci, what's your background? What gave you the authority to write this book?
Oh, the authority. Well, I'm a professor of psychology. Psychology is the study of human emotion and behavior. So I'm an expert on human behavior change. I've been studying the self-control of eating for over 20 years. And I think something that I believe separates me from other people who write or talk about this topic is that I've always come at it from outside of the diet industry, outside of the commercial diet industry, outside of the obesity research universe. outside of the medical universe,
Mm-hmm.
from the clear, human behavior side. And so because that, I feel like, and obviously we all have our biases and everything we do all the time, but I feel like I have significantly less bias than most people who write and talk about this topic, because I have never been trying to sell anyone anything. And my job, my career never depended on me finding anything in any particular direction. My career never depended on me showing that diets work or showing that they don't work. I've always been completely free as a tenured professor to show what is true without having someone say, no, you can't say that. You'll never get a grant again if you say that. I've always been kind of free of any kind of financial or any other kind
motivation
of interest. Yeah, which is really not true for most obesity researchers, MDs, and people out there in the diet business.
Well, and that leads to kind of a separate issue, is where people will hear on the evening news or on Facebook or from somewhere else about certain research proves such and such, and they're not questioning that research. Who paid for it? What was their motivation?
Right.
And they're not even, for the most part, reading the whole study or the abstract, so they don't even know if the person giving that information just cherry-picked something that they liked or something that was dramatic.
True. Yes, that's absolutely true. So my background as a psychologist has been, I have taught research methods from day one. And all we do in research methods is look at studies and figure out what's a flaw in the study, what's causing bias, what's not. And that's what I like to do. That's my little fun activity.
Nice.
It makes me sound like a nerd. I also like to do regular things. I really enjoy doing is picking apart studies and figuring out which studies I can believe and which studies are flawed.
That is fun. I like doing that
too. And that's what we do.
So you're a psychologist background. That's what you teach normally. And do you ever teach anything about emotional eating?
Well, I cover stress in my course, Introduction to Health Psychology. We talk a lot about stress, and we talk about stress and eating. Mm-hmm. So a couple things about stress. First of all, stress will mess up your diet. And this is research I did with my delightful former student, Janet Tomiyama. Diets actually cause stress. Diets actually cause a physiological stress response.
Right.
Which then sort of makes this horrible cycle of messing up your diet. So basically, dieting messes up your diet.
Yeah. Back in episode 8, I interviewed Dr. Edward Abramson, and he's written several emotional eating books. And he was actually one of my main sources of research when I was putting together my first program, because I know so many people eat for emotional reasons. And in this interview, I asked him, what percentage of women eat emotionally? And he said, pretty much 100%. And I said, okay, how about men? And he said, they're closer to 50 to 60%.
That's interesting. I have never encountered this research that he's talking about, but I haven't fully hunted for something like that. But I will say something about emotional eating, because we've done research on comfort food. Uh-huh. And we've done research looking at whether comfort food actually comforts people, which sounds like the stupidest thing you could ever do research on, because, of course, we all know it's true.
Are you about to say it doesn't comfort people?
Correct. Huh. We did this research because we were actually this was actually funded by NASA. NASA wanted to find a way to get astronauts. I know, it's the weirdest thing, but NASA wanted to find a way to get astronauts to eat more on long missions, because when astronauts go on long missions, they don't eat enough and they lose too much weight.
Oh.
And this would be a real problem if you're going to go to Mars, which takes 9 months to get to.
Yeah.
So they were interested in people researching ways to reduce stress with food and how to get people to eat more. And we thought giving astronauts comfort food was the perfect solution, because you're giving them food, so they're eating it. They're eating, yay, that solves that side of the problem. And it's making them feel better, because astronauts are very stressed. They won't say they are, but they are. They're extremely busy and all this. So we proposed doing that research, but NASA said before we did that, we had to do it with regular people, non-astronaut people. Mm-hmm. We had to show that comfort food made them feel better. And we were really bitter and cranky about this. We're like, why should we do that? That's so everyone knows it does.
It's obvious.
Exactly. And, scientists, we don't like to do obvious stuff. We don't like to do studies that everybody knows the answer to before we do it. And probably can't even publish that kind of study, and publishing is part of our job. So we were cranky, but that was the only way NASA would give us money to do the astronaut project. So we're like, okay, we'll do it. Mm-hmm. And we started searching the literature. First of all, there were no studies that tested whether comfort food actually provided comfort, which was bizarre.
Huh.
Again, there are no studies because everyone just assumed it to be true. So, my lab's all about testing what people assume to be true.
Right.
It actually is true. And so we did these studies. We designed the most rigorous study to test whether comfort food comforts. And what we found was that if you give people comfort food when they feel bad, it does make them feel better, but it doesn't make them feel better than if you gave them some other food that they liked. And it doesn't make them feel better than if you give them a food that they feel neutral about. And it doesn't make them feel better than if you give them nothing. So
hold on a second. So I'm feeling down and blue. I've had a bad day. It's raining. It's cold, 40 degrees outside, maybe windy too. I'm just sort of bummed out. So if there was a table and there was a plate of bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy and another one of pizza and a bowl of steamed broccoli and a glass of water, any one of those would make me feel better equally?
Yep. That's correct. And nothing. So basically, here's what's happening.
Wait. How would nothing make me feel better?
Because people just feel better over time. So basically what this research shows is that people are giving comfort food credit for mood improvements that would have simply happened with the passage of time. That's what people are doing.
Emotions pass.
Absolutely. So, people are not set up to realize that that's what happens. If you eat a donut, if donut's your comfort food and you eat it when you feel bad and you feel better, of course you're going to credit the donut. Okay, but what you don't realize is that even if you hadn't eaten the donut, you would have felt better just the same amount. I'm not saying in either case, I'm not saying, do you feel all the way better? Do you feel your optimal self? Not necessarily. But the amount better that comfort food makes you feel is just the same as how much better you'd feel with the passage of time. So,
is there a time difference between eating your comfort food and not eating anything? Will you feel better in the same amount of time? Will they be equal?
In studies you did, yeah. Huh. Everyone just felt better in the same amount of time. But so two quick things. So first of all, what this says is if you're feeling bad, don't use that as a justification to eat your comfort food. You know what I mean? You shouldn't say, oh, I get to eat this because I feel bad and it's going to fix me, because that's not true. And but there is something called comfort food. I believe in the concept of comfort food, but what I think it is just the thing that you happen to want when you feel bad.
Gotcha.
And I believe that when people feel bad, they do want specific things, and it's idiosyncratic. Everybody has their own particular thing that they want when they feel bad.
Right.
I get that, and I want certain things when I feel bad, but you do need to keep in mind having those things is not doing you anything special. It's not doing something differently for you than having anything else would have done.
Well, one of the things I learned from Dr. Abramson is that if you have a craving, it's going to go away whether you satisfy it or not. If I have a craving right now for ice cream, let's say, in an hour, I'm not going to have a craving for ice cream, whether I've ingested that ice cream or not.
Well, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's true.
But that goes along with your emotions. Emotions change. Emotions pass.
Absolutely. Emotions change. So people need to stop giving their comfort food credit for improvement.
I agree.
Or just test it on yourself. Next time, instead of having your comfort food, have something healthy. Or most people's comfort food is not healthy, but
I know.
And see if you feel better. I suspect you'll feel just the same amount better as if you had the comfort food. Actually, that's one of my strategies, is to not eat comfort food when you feel bad. Mm-hmm. And I actually recommend instead saving those foods for when you're happy and you can really fully enjoy and appreciate them. sort of more in the savoring side of the coin instead of the suffering
Right.
side of the coin. Yeah, because I think you should never have those foods. Again, you shouldn't never have those foods. You should have those foods, just not that often.
I agree.
Not that much. But, you know, we need to live our lives and be happy and enjoy things. So any life plan that involves restricting yourself from eating things you love is just not tenable. That's not a way to live.
No, it's not long range either. It's fine if you want to give up chocolate for a week or a month, but don't think that you're never ever going to eat it again, unless, of course, it causes migraines or some horrible
Sure, if a food makes
reaction.
you ill, obviously you shouldn't have it. But in general, when there's things you love, just allow yourself to have them, but try to keep it in moderation and not all that often. So
Exactly.
I try not to eat marshmallow Peeps every day. That is my effort.
Yeah, I try to go my entire life without eating those.
I know grown-ups don't like them, but I do.
So far I've been pretty successful.
Yeah. Well, luckily they're not available most of the year.
True. I hear they're really good roasted over a fire.
I agree. I also like them refrigerated.
Oh.
There's many ways I like them. This conversation is not productive for me personally because it's making me want them right now.
Well, let's talk about how delicious steamed broccoli is. And when you were talking about comfort food, I was actually thinking that a piping hot bowl of steamed broccoli and a little bit of butter and salt and pepper is just fantastic. And I find that to be comforting because it's warm and it tastes good. And I know it's just doing so much good for my body that is comforting and that makes me feel better.
Yeah, you definitely feel good about eating. Excuse me. You definitely feel good about eating certain foods. But I will say this about broccoli. Well, first of all, in elementary schools, they give broccoli raw to kids, which I think is the toughest way to eat broccoli.
Right.
It's the least tasty way to eat broccoli.
Right.
Secondly, broccoli secret, roast it.
Oh, yes.
With a little olive oil.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a decent amount of salt. Put that in the oven. It is delicious that way. My kids will eat tons of it that way. Steam it, they couldn't give it the time of day.
I put it in the skillet in the morning with my eggs often with some coconut oil, and I let it burn a little bit on one side, and it just kind of roasted, toasted, not very burnt, but just a little bit of bit of char, and it really changes the flavor and stinks up the house. My wife hates it, but hey. And another thing I was going to say about comfort food is that it took my wife a while to figure out that she likes to cook, and it's a way she shows her love, and which is great because I like to eat. Mm-hmm. But it took her a while to really figure out that when she fed me unhealthy foods, I was not enjoying it, was not liking it. And yet when she gave me healthy foods, a really healthy meal, that's when I felt the love from her. Because if she's trying to help me be healthy and she wants to keep me around a lot, that shows me that she loves me. Yet if she bakes me a cake or something, I go, yeah, thanks.
Right. It's true. I mean, in my house, a couple of us love to bake, but here's the secret to baking. I have secrets for all things all the time. Apparently.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, no, I really don't. I'm not nearly this insufferable in real life. But here, our secret to baking, since we do love to do it, is we always, always, always invite the neighbors over when we bake something.
Really?
And suddenly, when you have to cut up a pie into 12 pieces, you're fine. Enjoy that. You know, you're eating a smaller amount. It's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, with eating a smaller amount. And that's how you get to enjoy the things you like without having too much of them.
Yep.
And your neighbors love you.
Exactly. So it's a win-win-win.
Yeah. And it's fun. I mean, you know, just makes it pleasant. I prefer that to never having pie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Traci, it's been great talking to you. I think your ideas are fantastic. Everybody needs to go out and buy Secrets from the Eating Lab. I will have a link to it on the show notes at livefitpodcast.com. How can people get a hold of you if they want to go directly to you, Traci?
Go to me. Oh, they can. Actually, there's a little link to contact me on the book's website, which is actually under my name. It's www.tracimann.com, and my name is spelled with an I.
So TraciMann.com.
Yes, that's right, tracimann.com.
All right, Traci. Well, thank you once again. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, birds of a feather, and all that. And I wish you the best of luck on the sale of your book. I hope it doesn't bum too many people out, but I think it'll actually make them dance in the streets and kick up their heels.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Once again, thank you, Traci. That was Dr. Traci Mann. She's the author of Secrets from the Eating Lab. You can find complete show notes with links back to her page, her book, and other information at livefitpodcast.com. Scroll down to episode 53. livefitpodcast.com, episode 53. Thank you, everybody, for listening once again, especially all the way here to the end after it's been an hour and 5 minutes or so. I really appreciate your dedication. I will have another show out to you very soon. It should be out in 2 weeks or less. Take care, everybody, and best of all, the best of health to you.